Hello, you beautiful, lovely, gorgeous individuals out there. Welcome to another edition of Talking Sam. I'm your host, Sam Macias, and with me today is one person I have been a fan of for a very long time. He is not only a magician in both the realms of magic and commentary, he is a former TNA Tag Team Champion, the 2007 King of the Europe crown. Wow, I'm so nervous inside. I'm tripping over my own words. He's a former pure Ring of Honor champion. He is also a former world champion for Ring of Honor. He is the one, he's the only Nigel McGuinness. Nigel, thank you so much for joining me here today.
My pleasure, Sam. Thank you very much for taking your time.
Absolutely, of course. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. I've been a fan of yours for a long time since we first jumped into WWE. And then from there on, going back to your past and learning so much about you. I heard rumblings of you, but I never gone into depth. But once you joined then and then learning everything about you from your times in Ring of Honor and everything from then, it's just been a blast knowing you. And you're just an amazing human being as well. I have to say, we're going to first start off going with kind of how you first began pro wrestling. And how did you first got into it? Was it a certain match or a certain wrestler that you just caught an eye and just from there on, you just couldn't stop watching?
Yeah, the first memory I have of American wrestling, certainly, we watched it in England, but it came off TV in 1988 in the UK. So the first recollection I have, it was SummerSlam 90. And
Oh,
my
okay.
childhood friend, Lying Dave, got a pirated copy of that on VHS. And I was just mesmerized by the glossy muscularity and the dramatized competition. And it was the Hart Foundation winning the WWF Tag Team titles that made me a
Oh,
fan for life. It's funny actually you asked me that question because I do this magic show, as I'm sure we're going to get into, and one
yes.
of the parts of that is talking about the first match that first made you a fan.
Nice, interesting. And you mentioned that little thing, American wrestling. When you were first learning all the tips and nuance of pro wrestling, what's one thing that you really learned when it comes from American wrestling and say UK wrestling? It's just different styles of storytelling, different styles of physicality.
Yeah, generally speaking, well, I started off with Les Thatcher in HWA in Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a real great grounding in not just being a professional, but also in terms of telling a story. Les was all high on that. Had a lot of experience in tag team wrestling, and psychology is super important in tag team wrestling. So I learned that sort of American style, and I went back to England to learn the British style, which has less emphasis on storytelling over the course of a match, less psychology, I guess you'd want to call it, but
Okay.
more technique and more individual little stories you can tell within a match as well. So both have their pros and cons.
Oh, okay, nice. And speaking of HWA, you were first, that's where you first began pro training, correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's where I first took
Mhm.
my first bump. Yeah.
Yes, you first started training there with Les Thatcher after graduating from Kent State with a degree of chemistry, correct?
Yeah, I had a year at Kent State, but I
Mm,
was through a sandwich course with a university in the
mm.
UK. So yeah,
Nice.
degree in chemistry. Not that I've used it, although I did use it yesterday when we were talking about things on the road trip up here. Yeah.
Nice. And how did you first discover his school? Was it just a flyer that you saw around the area, or was it someone just, hey, I know you love pro wrestling. Here's a school up the way. Do you want to go try it out?
No, the back of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, they had a pamphlet by Percy Pringle,
Mm,
otherwise known as Paul Bearer,
yep.
and he in it listed at the back of the pamphlet all the schools in America to learn. And at the time, I think there was about 10, 15, something like that. There weren't that many. And so I wrote a letter to every one of them. This was obviously back pre I don't know if it was pre-internet, but it was certainly the early days of internet if it was. But I wrote
Most
an actual
likely, yeah.
handwritten letter to them and only got two replies. One from the Monster Factory, which was just a leaflet, a flyer from the place, and the other one was from Les there in HWA in Cincinnati, which just got started up a year earlier. But actually, I'd written to Lou Thesz's school,
Okay.
and he'd shut that down and had forwarded all of the mail to Les because of the respect that he had for Les.
Interesting. And during your time there at HWA, how did that prepare you when you first going off to book in the independent scenes, getting your name out there? Was there a lot of that kind of training course that they had there to get you guys prepared and ready?
Yeah, somewhat. As I said, I learned as much about the in-ring as much to the outside of the ring and how to handle yourself as a professional, which shows to be on, which shows you shouldn't be on. To a certain extent, we didn't want to go around doing too many of the rinky-dink shows, which where you didn't know who you were going to work with and if the ring was going to be safe. But at the same time,
Okay.
you had to get out and you had to work with different people and develop your style. And I think that was as important, certainly, to be me becoming the wrestler that I eventually became.
Yeah, and from there, you've really began your name in Ring of Honor, which a lot of people know you from. Is there a moment of Ring of Honor time that you look back to today where you just still stays with you? Like, is there a special moment that you can't never forget?
Not a specific moment, I wouldn't say so. No, I mean there were just lots of very good memories. It's funny. I drove up yesterday. We're up here in Montreal now. I drove up yesterday from Erie with a couple of the boys, and it sort of took me back to those days in Ring of Honor,
Mm,
remembering being young and having your whole career ahead of you, or at least feeling like you did, and not making a lot of money, but just being in the job for because it was what you loved.
right.
It was a very different time, far more idealistic, perhaps, and certainly, certainly less, uh, certainly more poor, I guess, would be the best way of saying it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and seeing how Ring of Honor is now, is it good to see it still thriving, still going, especially during the pandemic. It looked like it was about to not see another light of day, but thanks to Tony Khan, it was able to come back and be more thriving. It was able for you to make a comeback as well in Ring of Honor.
Yeah, yeah, it was great when Tony picked it up. The problem with Ring of Honor a lot of the time is it never had the money behind it, the backing behind it to
Yeah,
take it to the next level. I mean, thank God for Kerry Silkin for keeping it afloat all those years when he wasn't making any money. Without that, it never would have survived at all. It never would have seen the light of day. I certainly wouldn't have had the career that I had without Kerry. Um, but that being the case, yeah, when Tony came on board and is still giving it a platform to exist and for guys to go out there every week and get better and work on their craft, yeah, I'm very, very happy about that.
nice. And I just want to touch on something real quick. You did had a stint in TNA, and you went under a different name of Desmond Wolf. When you first
Mm.
entered there, was did they present that name to you, or was it like did you both came up with it together? And was it kind of a you know okay, all right? And was it kind of a hit that you weren't able to put the name that you built on television in a sense?
Not really. I understood the business behind it. The idea of it obviously originally came from WWE and the fact they wanted to own
Mm,
your name, so they could market it and make money off of it, etc., etc. Tony's got a different opinion of that.
yeah.
He feels like if you've got cachet with a name already, then why am I changing your name? That's a very different mentality that Tony has from Vince, and certainly for me, it seems to be a better fit.
During your time that you ended with TNA, you went back to Ring of Honor, kind of doing a last retirement tour during this back in the day. Was it is it looking back on it now? It's been 10 plus years. Is it weird to have a retirement tour? And do you feel like maybe you still got maybe one last match in your now, or do you feel pretty good at where you're at in your career?
No, I always regret not getting to WWE and having those experiences that so many of my peers did. I mean, aside from the money, to wrestle on that stage and to have that level of recognition and to sort of live the dreams that you had. Uh, I think there'll always be a degree of yearning for that. But
Mm,
to use a cliche, that ship has certainly sailed. That being the case, I'm arguably in better shape now than when I was a wrestler. So I could wrestle tomorrow if I wanted. There's nothing really keeping me out of the ring, other than just the fact that I've got a lot of common sense. I mean, I don't want to
it's
why injure myself. For what? For come back for one sort of match. I mean, I'd be open to it for the right match, of course. If
Mhm.
I had any kind of inclination, any reason to get back in the ring. But without that, I'm extremely happy, extremely blessed to have the job I do now doing commentary.
Nice. And speaking of commentary, that's how I first discovered you when you first started with WWE in the UK tournament, then working with Michael Cole, and then from there on working with
Mm.
NXT. How was that experience like working under the WWE system of commentary, and how does that help you during your time in AEW now?
Yeah, it was a fantastic experience. I don't have a bad word to say about my time in WWE. They took care of me, and they paid me very well. But not only that, everything that I learned about commentary through working under Michael Cole. Michael Cole is a man who gets not even close to the amount of credit that he deserves.
Agreed.
Not just
Agreed.
doing his job, he's in my opinion the best play-by-play guy in the job today. But even behind the scenes, the way he takes care of people, I worked there for 6 years, and I think probably at least the last 3 or 4 years was solely on him keeping me in the job. So
Hmm.
if I know 100 things about commentary, I would say I probably learned 80 to 85 of those working for WWE, and it all eventually came from Michael Cole and Tom Phillips, obviously, who worked underneath him as well. But just working with Mauro Ranallo when I was there, and Vic Joseph and Sudu towards the end, everybody, it was a wonderful experience. Certainly, it was a little awkward in the sense of I couldn't talk about me being a wrestler before. I couldn't reference Ring of Honor.
Right.
Although there was this dichotomy that yes, I used to be a wrestler, but we don't talk about it. But beyond that, it was fantastic, and I'll always appreciate the years that I spent there.
Nice. And was that, like you said, was it a weird time, kind of like tippy toe around your career as a professional, but not really going more in depth on it?
At first, it was, and even yeah, there was always a moment of it, especially if I'd wrestled somebody before.
Mm.
Oftentimes I couldn't even really mention that because it would get us into the weeds about when it was, etc., etc. So oftentimes I just steered clear of it and just stuck to my meat and veg, which was adding color to the action that you were seeing in front of you, and trying to do better
Okay.
at telling the stories behind the scenes, and working on graphics and traffic and everything else that comes into it.
I have to say, probably my favorite tandem of you is you, Mauro Ranallo, and Beth Phoenix. You guys had some of the best matches calling during the takeover times. What
Mm.
is it? What is the difference between just being a regular commentator and being kind of like you as like it's not a heel, but sort of a antagonist sort of way, like rooting for the bad guys,
The
but not.
commentary is split into two types of people. You've got play by play, generally speaking, are the call what you see, call the
Mm-hmm.
action, tie up all the ends, get us to the next segment. They basically drive the train. And then you've got the color, which are the people who, as I said, add the different complexities and explain what's going on in the ring. Generally speaking, it's usually someone who used to be a wrestler themselves, like me or Beth in that situation. So
Okay.
it's within that, of course, you've still then got to find your own sort of niche in WWE. They were adamant that the people in the ring were the superstars, and our job was to get the superstars over. And certainly, I will agree with that. Still, that is our job to get ourselves over, get them over. But I also believe at the same time you can get yourselves over. And as we've seen, whether it's Bobby Heenan or whether it's Pat McAfee, there's
Mm-hmm.
always a space for the commentators to make themselves an entertaining part of the show. And to that point, I feel I have much more freedom, free reign in AEW to do that with my character. I'm not quite so concerned about potentially saying the wrong thing. There was a little bit more constraint on the words that we would use in WWE than there are in AEW. And so that gives me much more carte blanche to go out there and just sort of be myself and have a little bit of fun.
Your time ends in WWE and you move to AEW now. What has that been experienced like so far? We first see you coming back at in Los Angeles, and ever since then, it seems like you're having such a great time. How's it just been so far, being like around some of the fellas that you rode up and down the road with, and
Yeah, it's all been fantastic, Sam. It really has. So many people I know here already are here. It's funny. I remember when I started working in WWE and seeing so many guys behind the scenes that I knew from the independents. It was like being on a super independent show, and it's kind of
mm,
feels the same way here in AEW now. And I say why it was funny because what 2005, 2010, the idea that if you worked on the independents, you'd go and be a main player in WWE was unthinkable.
right?
Just until the change in mentality there, you just never thought there was going to be a chance. You might get a few guys who go up there and be, sort of lower to mid card guys, but never a guy like, you know, Brian Danielson who'd go there and be a world champion, and that all changed through guys like Brian and Punk and everybody else that went there. And so now it's a completely different world in professional wrestling than we ever could have imagined.
Yeah, definitely 100%. And in that new world that we live in now, we see you in the main forefront when it comes to anything involving the UK. And it seems that anything revolving, if it's an announcement for ticket sales, announcing the record breaking attendance, Tony Khan has you front and center. How does that feel for you on both a personal and a career level for you?
Yeah, it's an honor. It really is an honor that Tony holds me in such high esteem to allow me to do that announcement. I mean, Wembley Stadium, I was there in SummerSlam 92. You asked me about the
Mm-hmm.
matches that made me a fan. You know, it was SummerSlam 90 that made me a fan. It was SummerSlam 92 that gave me the inclination that I could actually be a wrestler myself. I was there at Wembley Stadium. So to come back there 31 years later and to be the guy in the ring making that announcement, and only finding out 5 minutes earlier I was actually going to do it,
Oh, wow.
was you couldn't write that, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
to me, AEW and Tony Khan specifically has been able to help me bring my career full circle and yeah, make a lot of my dreams come true.
Definitely. And one of those dreams I'm assuming that's coming true is you as a fantastic magician, as I've been hearing. It's just how's that been so far going to the shows and just performing for everyone like that? How did that love for magic kind of start? Was there a trick that you saw and just you want to learn for yourself and that kind of like opened the gate for you?
Yeah, at first I saw a kid at school do a couple of magic tricks, and I paid him £5 to
Mm.
show me how to do them, and they were very simple, just a couple of little things. And then when I started going to Japan, was when I really first got into doing magic tricks. With the sponsors would take us out a lot after the shows. I didn't
Okay.
speak any Japanese. We'd be there sometimes for 2 or 3 hours eating. So just as a way of showing my appreciation, I'd bring a deck of cards and learn a few little tricks. And then it just became doing more stuff behind the scenes. And then there was a period in my life while I was, well, it's always a period in my life, but back then I was specifically trying to impress women. And so that being the
Ah.
case, you know, why do we do anything in life, right?
That is true.
So
That is true. Can't
that
deny that.
became that, and then I was very lucky to find a very good woman
Mm-hmm.
in my girlfriend, who's actually part of the magic show along with me now as well. And it was actually the unfortunate passing of Jay Briscoe in January of this year that convinced me to do my own show. Everybody had talked about it for a while. Why don't you do your own show? And there was so much that went into it. And I just, when you get that sort of knock, that nod that life can end at any moment, and you got no guarantees, you realize why not? What we got to lose? Give it a shot. And so we spent 3 weeks putting together this show. It's now in its fourth rewrite. We've done about 6 or 7 shows.
Oh, wow.
Some
Okay.
have been better than others, but it sort of taken me back to the early days of wrestling, doing very small venues, not really sure how many people are going to show up. Sometimes I've had to even change the show because there's not enough people in the
Mm.
crowd to do enough magic for. But it's I would say arguably it's one of the things I'm most proud about creating. In terms of that, I've got my documentary that I made back in 2012,
Mm-hmm.
the magic show to go along with it, and then the full body of work as a commentator, and then back as a wrestler. I've been extremely blessed to have had the life that I have.
Would you say it's kind of a third act in your not only your life but in a career, being the magician performer now?
Yeah, possibly. There's some overlap, certainly. I think it was F. Scott Fitzgerald who said there are no second acts in American lives, but
Mm.
it certainly seems for me, yeah, to your point, I've had two or three.
Yeah, definitely, most definitely. And again, shout out to your girlfriend, we both know, who was able to set this up together. Amazing. Shout out to her. And again, condolences for your passing of your friend Jay Briscoe. I know so many people were devastated by that tragedy. Him and his family. It's just condolences to
Mm.
the passing of your friend.
Yeah, yeah, it was very sad. It happens a lot, not just in pro wrestling, but in the world. Uh, Jay Briscoe was someone who was so universally loved and respected, and someone who was so alive that his death, I think, was particularly stunning to everyone. Again, I drove up yesterday with a couple of the boys, and we were talking about how it affected them. And again, the incredible faith and resiliency of Jay's family,
Mm-hmm.
to come out and I didn't get a chance to go to the funeral, but one of the guys did, and he just said the outpouring of respect was incredible. The entire town, the place was just full. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That's awesome. To see all that love and support for him and his family. That's absolutely wonderful. With your magic, going back to that, do you sometimes kind of test it out with the boys in the locker room and on the road to see how it will play out before you go out and perform it for the audience?
No, they're two different things. The boys
Mm.
will all be close up magic. It'll be cards, little gimmick stuff like that. That
Okay.
doesn't translate to the actual show that I'm doing. That was the big adjustment for me, is I've never really done any sort of show magic before.
Oh, okay.
Half the show is mentally. Yeah, so it was a real change. So there's not really any opportunity to really try things out, because oftentimes you need two or three people involved, and
Mm-hmm.
you need other people watching as well. So yeah, I need to just basically get and do as many shows as I possibly can. That's just finding enough venues and then finding enough people to come and actually watch the show.
Nice. And has there been a certain city that has really come out for you, or that you've really gotten a big response?
Well, we've done a couple of shows in London, and there's always a good turnout there. And I say what a good turnout is, I don't really know, how many wrestling fans there are, etc., etc. I think the difficulty is it's hard to explain to people what it is.
Mm.
I think oftentimes and you still get it, and this is arguably another of the similarities between magic and pro wrestling, is that the general perception of them isn't exactly what it is. You tell
Right.
someone you like pro wrestling, and of course, it isn't that fake, and does it really hurt, and all these sort of cliches, and oh, I'm a magician. Oh, can you saw me in half? And is there
Mm.
a rabbit coming out of a hat? All these sort of like stereotypes that exist, when the
Right.
reality is very different. And my magic show isn't really even a magic show. It's more a spoken word show. Half of the word is me going into details about my career, the experiences that I've had, and then it's engaging other fans to tell me their stories as well. And then the magic is sort of the icing on the cake that ties it all together. So it's an incredible show. I just wish I could get more people to see it.
Is there anything that you want to do more with your magic? Is you have anything planned that you're looking forward to do in the future?
No, not really. I mean, as I stand, this is the show that I've got on its feet right now, and I'd like to, in an ideal world, get it to the stage where it's sort of as good as it's going to get, and then maybe film it with a full crowd, and then put it out on Netflix. And once it's out there and once it's done, then obviously you
Mm-hmm.
can't keep performing it because people already seen it. But
True.
yeah, and other than that, nothing really. No.
Okay. And well, I have to say thank you so much for joining me, for your time. I know you got a lot of things to do. You're a busy man. You're an important man, Mr. McGuinness. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. If everyone wants to find you or follow, where can they go?
Yeah, you go Instagram and Twitter. Do you still call it Twitter? What do the kids call it
You
nowadays? Is it?
know, it technically it's X, but it's still Twitter. If you
Yeah,
type
if
it
I
in, it's
say Twitter,
twitter.com still. Yeah.
oh, is that right? Okay, good. So there
Yeah.
you go. Well, yeah. So I'm at McGuinness Nigel on both of those, and if my buddy Alan can convince me, I might get on TikTok as well. I don't know. There's only so many hours in the day, right? I want to be able to just relax.
Hey, we would love to see you do a trick on TikTok. I know a lot of people love some magic there.
And man, all right, sure.
Yeah, if you guys can follow me on Twitter at SamMac55, Instagram at SamMacias5, and on my YouTube channel just at Sam Macias. If you type my name, I will be the first one there. You don't believe me? I will send you a Canadian penny. That is true. I have done that before. Until next time, everybody, have a good one. Bye.